stuff like that. But if we just adopt these natural principles, what we're doing here is mimicking nature by condensing their space. We're going to move them every 1 to 5 days. That's exactly what massive herds of, whether it be buffalo or whatever it is, things are migrating with the weather, predators, feed, all these different things. And so when we do that on a micro scale, you know, again, if I let them out, if I fence all this off and just turn them loose, they're going to find a corner of their favorite food. They're going to compact the hell out of it. Then they're going to go over to their favorite tree and just dump it all out there, and they're just nutrient mining instead of condensing, moving slowly around, and just mimicking migrations. And so their manure is a lot more concentrated. The biggest benefit here, there's a million of them, but if there's 200 sheep out here, basically every day they're eating 5 pounds and they're putting out 5 pounds, and it's perfectly balanced compost, essentially. And so again, if we're out in the vineyard, we're just marching through that. We don't have to mow. The pruning of all those species is sloughing off nutrients back in. Grass wants to regenerate. We're back in about 3 to 6 weeks to do the same thing. So that's the nuts and bolts. It allows us to get rid of things like chemical wormers. If you stay ahead of the parasite cycle, you just get a much more nutrient dense meat. We get a byproduct instead of burning diesel, obviously, and they just fit into the vineyard perfect. I've tried goats, I've tried cattle. I don't even like sheep that much. I don't really mean that, but you know, they just come in, they leave the vines alone for the most part. Yeah, they just fit in perfectly. So this is generally where, you know, we're seeing them. They'll cover everything pretty quick. We just came from over there. That about 12 acres. That was 6 feet tall cover crops. So every 3 days, it just went from this to just completely gone. If you go out there, just perfectly distributed manure. That'll digest and just become perfect topsoil.
How long have they been here now?
Last night.
Okay.
Yeah, but we didn't sow this field with the same cover crop.
Yeah, so this is a field I like to leave alone, just because you can see these perennial grasses that are coming in real nice.
This is all natural.
You can seed into them, but they just kind of get out competed. There's different techniques to get a better yield.
Yeah.
I see the sheep do a lot better on some of these perennial species, so I like to leave a lot of these alone. Profit's a little bit higher if I'm not dumping seed and stuff like that into them. So this is a good spot that I really like. You're seeing a lot of these weird, kind of rare grasses come back. There was a lot of fescue, but now you're starting to see some other like blue stem type stuff. So that's another part of it that the soil is kind of begging to be treated the way it was 1,000 years ago. You know, we came in with the Industrial Revolution to start tearing everything up. But if you just let it go back and apply these natural principles of migrating animals, you see stuff waking back up. It's all about rest and recovery, the way it would be in nature. When you mow your lawn, do you mow it and then drop the blade down and mow it again? You let it come back. You want those solar panels essentially to get as big as they can, bringing in all that, sloughing it back into the soil. But through, you know, rest and recovery and the animals grazing, the diversity starts to come back. If we never sowed a single seed, 5-10 years from now, you're going to see incredible species coming back that have just been laying dormant in the soil, just waiting for the right opportunity. But
any problem with poisonous species that can poison the animals? Or?
you know, I try to keep an eye on that, and there's never been anything that told me I can't graze this at all.
Oh, okay.
Even like, there's a lot of, like, pigweed is one that can, if you really look deep into it, there's
Dog
going to be...
fennel, I guess.
What's that?
Dog fennel, I guess.
I don't have much experience with that one. In my opinion, especially since we're migrating. Now, if I were to take a field of whatever that toxic species is and bale it into hay and put them in the barn and feed them nothing but that for a couple weeks, yeah, they might get sick. But right now, when they have the choice, and they're also going to be in the next spot, and also a lot of those kind of need to be, the thing about grasses and a lot of these, they want to be grazed and they want to be rested. The annual kind of nasty weeds and stuff you don't want, over time you'll see them kind of dwindle out because we're putting, the grasses they don't have to create a seed and drop it to reproduce. They want to be grazed and regrow, grazed and regrow. And a lot of those things you don't want, it kind of creates a dead end. You know, maybe they eat the seed, maybe they damage the plant a little bit, just enough that the grass kind of takes over and starts filling that void a little bit better.
This is ideal right here.
Yeah, that's great. You can see they've nibbled on it a little bit.
Yeah.
There's been times where we've been on like some sorghum that's really, really rich, and they start to get the runs a little bit. You put them back on this perennial stuff, and it's like overnight. They just respond so much better to it. But there's nothing wrong with grazing the cover crops at all. I just kind of see a difference. But they are great at controlling our cover crops. It's another thing we're doing. So when the season comes around, again, we're not at full capacity with the sheep, so we still do some roll crimping on some bigger fields. But yeah, ideally, livestock come and knock all that cover crop down, kill it, lay down all the fertilizer that they can, and then seed behind it. That seems to be the best process for terminating cover crops. Another thing you also see here is the entire system is mobile. So I'm not dependent on land or anything like that. I can go anywhere I want to right now. I got my water in there, gravity fed down to a float valve. The electricity for the fence is also in there. Everything I need. So
Solar panel.
the solar panel collects for power battery, out of charger, and then so that's all stationary right there. I can be in any part of the vineyard, any corner. I could be at the ice cream shop. I could be up here. So that's another good part of it. Way over there, you can see our mobile shade as well. That's essential. Because then I don't, like right now I'm lucky on having these trees, which you can tell they really like. But that thing, I can close that up and I could drive to California right now if I had to. And that opens it, and that allows just proper manure distribution. I can put it any corner of the small pasture or, you know.
I don't see what you're talking about. The shade.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see.
So you see where the white building is?
Yeah.
Just in front of that, there's like a tripod.
Yeah, that's on
Okay.
a trailer.
It's like a giant umbrella.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It looks almost like a Chinese fan.
What's the diameter of that?
I think it's.
It doesn't look big from
I
the.
think it's 6.
Yeah.
It's 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
It's a
sizable.
lot. I can fit up to like 350, 400 sheep can fit under there and get proper shade.
Okay.
Would you move that around like daily or
Yeah.
every couple days? Yeah.
Yeah. So between moving the fences, moving my water and electric trailer, and that thing, on a good day is about 2 hours. So 2 hours every morning. And again, I'm moving every 1 to 3 days. So I'll cheat on a Friday and make an extra big paddock.
But
How
you
d-
move the shade
Yes.
daily.
How would you move the sheep like long distance? Like,
Border collie and a quad.
oh really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hell yeah.
I didn't bring
That's
Sophie
fun.
out today. Yeah, that's the funnest part of the job.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, we used to use cattle and stuff like that. Or I'm sorry, horses. That's a lot of fun too.
Uh huh.
But yeah, there's a sheep barn up at the top. Sheep aren't awesome at getting wet like cattle.
They are.
No,
Okay.
they don't like being wet.
Yeah.
If it's warm out, you can get away with it. If they're wet and then you get down into the 30s like we did last night, you're gonna
Yeah.
start seeing pneumonia and stuff like that.
Right.
New lambs don't last.
They
very
hold
long
water
with that.
a lot.
So anytime we see weather coming, and a lot of people that I explain this to, oh, you're doing that too much, you're doing that too much. Like, come do it with me once. I guarantee you want to do it every day. It's a blast, especially when everything's working really well, and the dog really figures it out. The sheep
Yeah.
understand the dog.
It's like you had a long day, and it's like, dang, I just want to chase these sheep around.
Pretty
I
much.
gotta get my fix.
Yeah, so we were over there last night, and I let him out. Normally I don't do it by myself, but last night I was like, hey, I don't have anything to do. If it turns into a rodeo, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were, everybody's working real good. I could have been here in 2 seconds, but let's go for a walk. Like literally, I just kind of wandered out there. I let them go into the vineyard and just see how they fared, and just brought them out. And again, the dog makes everything a lot simpler. If I do, imagine 250 sheep in that vineyard right now with all that wire, and all I have is myself and a quad. It's going to be a nightmare.
How long
So-
does it take you to train your dog? Because I have a border collie who's not quite
Good
there.
question. So I've had a few in the past. If you were serious about it, find a good breeder and trainer, and that's how they make a living. They basically get a dog to about 2 years old and farm ready. They call it finished, started or finished. And for about $3-4 grand, you can get a dog that speaks English pretty much. And I always said, oh my gosh, you spent $4,000 on a dog. It's like how much you spend on your golden doodle in the first 6 months.
How many hours it saves you?
Oh, it saves you hours and hours. It saves diesel. The dog can do the work of 5 people. If I had no dog and I needed to move all the way up there, it'd be all hands on deck. It'd be 6 people in their running shoes, you know, and they scatter.
It'd still be a nightmare.
They don't respond to. So it really is an ancient relationship when it comes to the grazing and all that, but all the way down to using the dog because it's
Primeval.
wolves have an alpha. The young dogs go chase whatever they're hunting and bring it to the alpha. That's all the dogs are doing. And so we've just bred out that last step. Sometimes still people bite, but for the most part, it's been bred and trained outward. So
What do you do if she does? Just say no.
kick her ass.
Yeah, kick her ass.
No,
Yeah.
she needs to do it a little bit, but it's a respect thing.
Uh-huh.
So I just say out, and she usually, goes out. But the first month or two of bringing them in, these sheep had never seen a dog before, so they're very, they come up and they down with their foot or they scatter. So she's had to nip some ankles, and now like even those folks, when they came walking their dog, I looked over here and the sheep kind of. So when the dog's around, they're just a lot more obedient.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you pen her when you're not using her, or?
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Is the difference between a working dog and a non-working dog is
Yeah.
huge. They don't understand that they're not working, and if they go out and try to work on their own, they're going to get into trouble. They also are allowed to practice bad habits without me controlling it. So I do treat her as much like a family dog as I can,
Yeah.
but there's a big difference.
Yeah, you've got to. I mean, I've got a border collie that's
Yeah.
trained, and like we kind of let him run around,
Yeah,
just because it's also the family dog,
yeah,
and he kind of gets out of the habit, and we have to put him up for a while,
yeah.
and then retrain him a little bit,
Right.
and then put him back out because otherwise, I mean, he was hurting the ducks. And and then that changed how he herded, and then
Yeah.
now he goes out, he's not as aggressive.
Yeah.
So and do you only run in one dog at a time with this many sheep?
Right now, yeah.
Yeah.
I am aware that pretty soon I'm gonna have to get a second dog, and every
Yeah.
once in a while, she needs to really work and get tired.
Yeah.
But boy, is she tired when she's done. She does a lot of running.
You don't have any Pyrenees or guard dogs. This keeps your
So far,
predators
so
at bay?
good.
Yeah.
In California, I had a lot of experience with guarding dogs. It was 100% necessary.
Coyotes out there kill.
And that's nothing compared to mountain lions.
Well, that's true.
The
Yeah,
coyotes I can
you
deal
had
with.
mountain lions too, yeah.
If I keep this real hot,
Yeah.
I'm sure a coyote could jump over this. But if I can keep the charge of this consistent, they're going to come and check it out before they jump. And if they come and get shocked, I don't think they're going to go, oh, all I need to do is get a running start. So far I've been lucky. Again, we're lucky that's the only predator here.
You had cat, a lot of cat up there. And,
Real bad.
yeah.
I'm
yeah,
sure you know
yeah, I
Thousand
know
Oaks. They'll hop in and take 12 every night.
And
Or
forgive
every
my
butt for
ignorance, but what is there a zone? We don't have sheep down where I'm at. Do we have a zone that they're not good for? Because I'm like 30 miles from the coast.
No,
I've got
they really aren't. It might come down more to a breed thing. Like in California, we run more Dorper. It's a South African animal. So in California, it's the feet that you got to worry about. And so Dorper are really acclimated to dry climate. If you bring them to a wet climate, they start getting hoof rot. So that's why these are Katahdin hair sheep from Maine. So you just kind of think about where they came from, what they're designed for, like a husky versus a
They can
greyhound.
take the humidity. I mean, decent. Like it's very humid down
Yeah.
there. I'm sure it's humid up here
So
too.
as long as water, never running out of water is the most important thing. They can regulate a lot of their temperature that way, and shade. And so that thing is vitally important. Sheep, yes, in general can be very not heat tolerant, but if you just take care of those two things, you're pretty good.
There's been research carried out that shows if you provide shade for them, either natural shade or the shade umbrella, it increases their productivity in field by about 70%.
Oh,
It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, they go from eating to not eating, essentially. And if
Did
they're
you
that
say
stressed.
you shear them or you don't shear them?
So that's another benefit of hair sheep. There's hair sheep and there's wool sheep. It's getting cold, so you're going to see their hair, not wool, get a little bit thicker. And then in the springtime, when we start warming up, every tree, every trellis, every fence, they're rubbing on, and it all falls out.
Oh.
In turn, you get a much more mild, palatable lamb. I don't know if anybody's had hair breed lamb versus the other, but it's night and day.
Yeah.
It's way more mild and a little bit more palatable for most Americans, I think, which is another big hurdle to jump with sheep. Is Americans just don't eat lamb for the most part. It's kind of a novelty.
This lady's got a question.
Your labor for the day, on an average, how many people does it take?
2 guys, 2 hours
And then
if I'm moving.
and
So
then
if
what
I'm moving
about
every
you have
day.
lambs here too though? You don't have all.
Yeah, so we'll start lambing pretty soon here.
And then you had on extra labor help.
It would still just be me. I would just add on maybe 30 minutes. So I would come out here early in the morning, find all my new lambs. I got a little kit where I'll come up, I'll castrate all the males, give them an ear tag, write down who their mother is and their tag number. And if I expose my rams at the right point, I only have about 2 months of that, and that'll be my whole year's worth. So, and again, I like to do every one, depending on what we're doing, 1 to 3 days. 3 days is my cutoff before I'm continuously grazing, you know, and kind of hammering. You always want to walk away from the paddock with some ground cover, obviously. It leaves it in the best shape to regrow, you're covering the soil. They're not getting their noses too close to the soil, which is where a lot of the larvae is going to hang out. So at about, you know, so that 2 or 2.5 hours a day really is if I'm moving every single day. But on the grand scheme of things, that's not bad compared to a conventional system. You know, especially like a dairy farm. Every drop of food they get has been handled via diesel, essentially. So when you think about what you're doing, it really does save you a ton. I don't have to do a lot of the, you know, the chemicals and all that. It saves. It's got its gives and its takes, you know.
How much land do you need per sheep and normal when if you're doing rotational grazing?
That's a very variable answer when you think about it. So every piece of ground is going to be different. You know, I can have 6 foot tall grass on 200 square feet, or I could have 1 inch grass on 10 times that. And so that obviously changes how long they would actually be there. But if you, a ballpark would be like a half to an acre per sheep. So the stocking rates are a little bit harder to figure out versus a conventional system where you would just have a big, you know, fenced in field and just letting them go. So, yeah. But they really do fit perfectly into the vineyard system. They're eating everything down low, stimulating growth upwards. The vine kind of has a response to that as well, suckering and all that kind of thing. I think I was saying earlier, I've tried. No, just for weather. Yeah, so they're totally fine out here. That's another thing I breed for.
How do you deal with like sudden thunderstorms?
Yeah.
When we get that like, oh, it's beautiful, and then you get a downpour.
Yeah, I mean, you just gotta watch the weather. If it's gonna hammer rain, let's get them up. If it's just gonna thunder a little bit, they're fine. You know, I'll just check on them. I mean, I try to breed for a very self-sufficient lamb as far as like parasite resistance. Not assisting with birds is another big one. I want them to behave like a wild animal. I want them to look and behave like a wild animal. A wild animal's not going to have a bunch of wool on it that needs to be sheared. So every little thing you kind of have to evaluate, whether it's getting hoof rot or needing assistance or needing extra feed or whatever these things are.
Dane, there was a few questions about mulch down at the vineyard that
Yeah.
I'd rather you and Colin answer.
Of course.
Do you want to voice, what was it? Was it Max? What, you had a question on mulch.
Oh, the machine you use to spread the organic matter, is that a custom-made machine?
No, that's from a company called Mill Creek,
Mill
and they're in
Creek, okay.
Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's the Mill Creek row mulcher. They make a bunch of different sizes. That's been a really good machine.
Is that the side feeder?
Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
I can
pretty
drop
versatile.
side, and I
You can
spread.
drop spread, you can side spread off
Yeah,
of both
yeah, yeah.
sides,
And the
you
other
can side
thing that's
spread off of one
great about that
side.
machine is it's been designed for compost and mulch and woody,
Right.
chunky.
Yeah.
How many
pieces
yards
and stuff.
can it hold? About 6.5, 7. Nice.
They
Yeah.
make massive ones. They make real small ones. Ours is kind of in the middle because of the width in the vine rows. Is why we went with that one. I think they make one that goes up to like 10 yards.
Wow.
And how does it handle damp
11
material
foot.
well as well?
Yes, but there's a difference.
Okay.
So when we're in like the really damp stuff, we might not go as heavy. We might do a little bit less because it just comes out a lot nicer, especially if we're doing the side feeders.
Yeah. Okay.
It's got a conveyor going this way, and then it catches the side ones and throws it out. So, but yeah, if you were to just use a plain old manure spreader, it's
no,
yeah,
no.
yeah. This thing has been great. Like anything else, it's got certain little mechanical corners.
idiosyncrasies.
I will
and this
say,
and that,
very easy to work on. 2 socket sizes.
That's true.
Whole machine.
Soggy sockets.
Spoken like a true mechanic.
Yeah.
I had to say 2
handmade
sockets.
by Amish. It really
Keep
was.
track
We
of
went
that
up there
from-
and there were Amish dudes welding, like,
Yep.
which I was like, "Ooh, that's a little crazy." Go ahead.
So for the sheep, on a daily basis, if there's no weather and you're not moving, what do you usually spend your time on? Is there
I come
anything
out.
you need to do?
Yeah. Oh, I mean everything in general. Yeah, everything on the farm. But
He
if I were to
said
come
some
out on day I'm not moving,
Drinks.
I'm gonna come out. If it's lambing, I'm gonna look for lambs. I'm gonna make sure my battery's good. Make sure the mineral's full, the water's full enough. A couple things like that. Just the basics. Even to just walk the perimeter so that I'm gonna go on a limb saying you guys have nobody here has used this kind of fencing. The key to this working is checking it religiously.
All the time. Yeah.
If there's too much grass laying on it, maybe you forgot to plug one of these together. So like if this is pulled apart, no more electricity. And so I've been doing this for so long. The worst thing that can happen is they get out, because that's a huge.
Where do you get this fencing from?
This is made by a company called Premier One. It's awesome. There's a lot of other systems where you can be using double, just 2 strands, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm relying on this because I have no infrastructure outside of it. It keeps the coyotes out. If I had 1 or 2 strands, they can come in. I'd be dealing with like a lot of 1 or 2 animals being out at a time, which if you're on a big giant ranch and you got the time and the space, it's not a huge deal. Go ahead.
So you mentioned how important water is.
Mhm.
1,000-gallon
Yep.
trailer, and then you've got your,
Yeah, so there's just a hose coming out the back
right,
to a float valve. That'll last me 10 days.
right, so automatic float valve.
Yeah.
But just that one tub takes care of all the
Yeah.
sheep. You just go to it when you need to.
Yeah, put it somewhere kind of central, flat, obviously, so the thing doesn't roll away.
So that's central.
Yeah. I would have liked to put it here.
Okay.
This is a little bit bigger than what I normally do because we've been going from really tall cover crop where I'm really trying to hammer it and flatten it out. The key with the cover crops, and even here, is you really only want to take about 1/3 of the vegetation. You want the rest to be trampled. So you would go really tight stocking density so that they're smashing a lot of it and just kind of taking off the top. But that's why this paddock is so big, because I don't want them to scalp it, especially going into the winter. I want to leave, because it's not going to regrow until the spring, so I want to leave a good 5-6 inches here.
And you don't have to supplement feed it anymore during the winter?
If we're in the barn, they get hay. Another step to all this is we're cutting all of our own hay off the cover crops. So it really is a completely closed loop. I bring in rams just to keep genetic diversity, but other than that, this is it. Yeah. So.
You're making hay with the cover crops. So
Yeah,
like, what's in your cover crops? It's like all the legumes and like all these different species.
Yeah,
They.
so whether it's
Barley,
winter or
chicory,
summer,
clover.
the species change for that.
Okay.
It's usually anywhere from like 6 to 10 different species.
Do you have to have specialized baling equipment for that?
So the tactic has just been a little different for your average, hay cutter. A friend of ours that lives here in the neighborhood cuts hay all over town. He's great at what he does, but it takes him a little bit of figuring out how like sorghum is huge. The stalk's like this big around. So there's a lot of different things he has to do to get it extra dry. Like I've seen him mixing the hay, stirring the hay multiple times a day rather than just like once a day, just to get it properly dried and cured.
I mean, are you putting like daikon radish in your hay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So dang, like.
If you ask somebody, it's going to turn bad, or it looks like a ragtag bale hay, but there's nobody out there baling hay of cover crop with 13 different things. If somebody was just growing it for hay, they'd keep it simple.
Yeah.
A legume, maybe 1 or 2 grasses.
So like before it's baled, like stuff like daikon, it's super thick and has a lot of moisture. Like, are you trying to dry it out completely, like, or get it down to like just a minimal amount of moisture content?
It's got to be, I think, less than 6% moisture. You want a little bit in there, but if you have too much, it starts to mold in the barn.
Yeah.
So
Which we were
it's got to be.
monitoring this whole time because the guy doing it, he's baled stuff like sorghum and millet and stuff, but by itself when it's young and not so out of control. So we've definitely kept our eyes on it, and that was cut back in April. I haven't found a moldy bale yet.
How long do y'all leave it out in the field to dry?
We're usually racing the rain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
As soon as it's in bales, it's on a trailer. Pretty much.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd line it all up on the side of the field and leave it as long as you can.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but before you bale it, like as you're like, you gotta go through and rake it and stuff and help it.
Oh
to,
yeah.
No,
He's raking a few times a day for probably 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Okay, before you even start
You're talking
baling.
pre-baling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking like how hard is it to get the like stuff like daikon down to that level consistently with all the other stuff.
We were concerned about that, but it really wasn't that difficult.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's made great hay. It smells really good. It kept a lot of its green.
Hell
Kept
yeah.
A lot of the seed and some of the, the bigger cereals that are growing, the big old seeds. And they do great on it. Again, it's only when we're up there. I think there's only been once where we were up there for more than like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
But they're up there. They're quiet and they're laying down, so it tells me they're full and happy.
Is that blend of hay like good for cows too?
Oh yeah.
Like pretty much all those animals.
Yeah. There's nothing I would
Okay.
worry about.
Okay.
in that. I mean, maybe a finicky horse that is
Okay.
prone to.
But who wants an Arab?
Gluten
right?
free or something.
Yeah. That's
do you have
awesome.
have you guys done crude protein analysis on your
It's
hay
on the
mix?
list. I definitely like to send it off, and it's probably going to be variable. I would
Okay.
assume not every, especially when you cover crop.
Sure. It's not.
Yeah, that cedar shakes around, and you might get a really thick patch of something like peas or something like that, and then a really thick patch of something else. But I would go out on a limb to say it's pretty high. We have.
Would your guess be it would be like an alfalfa hay?
I would guess about 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I doubt I'd see anything too much higher than that, but then you're just getting into ridiculously high numbers and giving your male stones and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but it's a great diversity. They kind of pick through it, and kind of and sheep, all grazing animals kind of do have that ability to balance their own feed out, especially in a diverse setting. They want a whole bunch of protein. Oh, now I need something that's a little bit higher in carbohydrates, as opposed to just dry lotting them on nothing but alfalfa, where they're going to have all sorts of problems.
And the same applies what we were saying about the phytonutrient and the nutrient density to meat as it does to the crops themselves. So we're tied in with an organisation called the Bionutrient Foundation and Institute. They are literally over the last 18 months been carrying out the first proper full research, laboratory tested. We're going to go through all the different food crops, but the first one they've done it on is beef. And they announced the details, you can see this online now, they announced the details of the research about 6 months ago to the Beef Federation and blew them away with the higher levels of nutrients and phytonutrients from cocktail cover crops.
And you
So
can
the
do
more
this
sources,
yourself.
the better.
Go to Costco and get a steak, and then find a local grass-fed producer, whether it's lamb or beef. You're way more satiated off of something like this. And it just makes sense. A phrase I like to use is biologically appropriate. We should all be living and eating biologically appropriate. There's nothing biologically appropriate about a bucket of corn and living on dirt. Whatever the species is meant to do in the wild, let's try to recreate. That's the reason wild animals don't need ivermectin. It's the reason they don't need alfalfa. This is crazy. Before we showed up, only 250 years ago, there were more bison and elk and all these than we'll ever have beef. So how, you want to tell me this can't be scaled up? It absolutely can be scaled up. We just have to change our perspective a little bit. There's grass everywhere. And once you get into livestock, you start driving down the road and you'll just see like a little roadside, like a little corner off a ditch. Just like, man, if I could put my goats just there for one day, So it's doable. It's doable. A lot of conventional farmers go, oh, you're never going to be able to put weight on them. They're never going to marble. That's crap. It's absolute crap.
If ever you're driving past, it's always nice to see the cows and the animals out in the pastures, but if you ever drive past, you'll know when you're driving past a conventional cattle ranch or cattle area, cattle field. if during certain times of the season you'll get them covered in the yellow buttercup.
Yeah,
It looks
it's a lack of
see-
grass and
looks
abundance of
beautiful,
weeds.
Yeah.
but that's highly toxic
Yeah.
to the cattle that are then feeding on it. So it's
Like-
you're restricting down what
Like
they
I was
can eat.
saying, they're going to be selective. So if there's some weed out there that's not that palatable, it's probably because it's high in some certain toxin. But if they don't eat it, what happens to it? It just goes crazy.
And it's
They're-
caused by overgrazing.
They're eating the grass and then eating it again and eating it again, so it doesn't get to that peak vegetative state to where it's out competing the bad stuff. So if they just keep eating their favorite stuff, leaving what they don't like, that's all you're gonna have left. That's why
And
you see pigweed.
These fields here
yellow
that you see
buttercup.
the sheep grazing in, so this used to be as part of the dairy. The fields on this side were where the cattle grazed. This looked like the Kalahari Desert within 2 months of the grazing starting, because you can imagine with cattle as well, you've got that overgraze and then you've got the compaction.
Mhm.
So as much as you get the benefits of the manure, you're getting a lot of the downsides of what they've had to do with how they graze it.
Yeah.
What do
Right, we need to head back, particularly if people want to use the restroom.